Well, I think, initially this whole process of story comes from my own story. I take a look back in grade 3, I had a teacher that kind of used a disparaging comment to me, and I believed it. Basically got through high school with a 45–50% average. They just kind of pushed me out into the world and said, good luck. But I went down to Western Ontario, and at age 26, because all of a sudden I said, I want something different. And I went to a professor, and I wrote the English exam to get accepted to the university, and I got 10 out of 100. And they said, you're not our type of student. But there was a professor there that said, Wayne, I think you can think, you just don't know how to write. Nobody's really taught you something about this talent that you have. And he spent about 6 months with me teaching me how to express my thoughts in the English language. And I went back to school and basically got a 4.0 for the next 13 years of my life. And part of this came back to me is that everybody's got a story. It's the story of the student that you need to start with. And if you understand where the story is, then you know where to connect. And so we have 4 degrees of resiliency. So we have impoverished kids, we have vulnerable kids, we have average resiliency, and optimal resiliency. And depending on how they score on their perception of certain factors, they end up in these categories. But what I was saying is that, a kid that has an impoverished resiliency actually is reflecting a surviving mindset. They don't believe in themselves, and they don't know how to have a relationship, and as a result, there's a real risk of them disconnecting from positive things in their lives. So therefore, if you're working with a kid that has a surviving mindset, it's not about teaching them skills at that point. They need to know that you actually value them. So it's all about relationship building at that point in time. Then we have the resistors, and they have that vulnerable resiliency, but they have certain beliefs about themselves because somebody has said, this is who you are, or you can't do something. And so they have these qualities that say, I'm afraid of it because I know there's something different for me, but I don't know how to access it. At that point, you have to help that child not only have a relationship, but to inspire them that, it can be different. So therefore, it's not about building again, it's about connecting and inspiring with these first 2 groups. Then you got your kids that are the average resiliency. And I call them strivers because they tend to do very well as long as they're in their comfort zone. We've actually raised a whole generation of kids that fall into this category. They are fairly well protected, they're somewhat looked after, and not a lot of big stressors in their life because we've been taught as parents that good parenting is about stress-free children. And as a result, there's sort of an entitlement in this generation. But as this average resiliency, I call them strivers because if they step out of their comfort zone, they really struggle. It's new to them. They don't know how to take on challenges. They don't know how to learn from their mistakes. You oftentimes see these kids going off to university. Research has told us that 30–40% of first-year university students experience significant mental health concerns, and 10% of them are suicidally active. And this is the so-called cream of the crop. These are the guys that have qualified for university, but yet they're not prepared to take on life. And then you have your optimal resilience, which I call thrivers. This is ultimately where we want kids to be in their orientation, that they like challenges, they learn from it, they grow from their mistakes. They see life as continually learning. They're looking for mentors and coaches in their lives, but they're also giving back. They're also realizing that success isn't just about them. It's about their larger community, their peers, other people, and they have this natural orientation to want to be part of something bigger than who they are, and therefore they gravitate to that. So in the journey of resiliency, it doesn't mean that you have poor resiliency versus positive resiliency. It doesn't mean it's good or bad. It just means that's what you've been taught. And what we want to do is come alongside and connect with them where we need to start that shifting of building their resiliency from the inside out so that eventually their natural orientation is to have this mindset of a thriver because they know how to adapt, learn from their mistakes, and they don't define themselves by what's happening around them. They define themselves by basic values or principles of how they think about themselves. What I realized is that real change is not something that I can demand of people or manage in people. Real change occurs when people start to realize that there's something different in who they are, how they see themselves, what their potential could be. And when you start that type of change, then people own their own journey. So I think I really realized that as a therapist, I don't control anything. I just have this amazing privilege to come alongside people who actually have amazing potential. They just don't know it yet. And as I often say, I actually think kids that break into homes will make amazing project managers.